Cuba! It's me! Episode 24 of the W.I.L.L.I.W show, which of course stands for Wrestling is Life. Life is Wrestling. I'm Elian Habanero, and today I wanted to talk about somebody that have inspired me, and they are the Highlanders, a great tag team who got their start in Ontario, went on to the WWE. Folks, a lot of people forget, or maybe they didn't even know, or it's been a while since they've been out of spotlight, how incredible these guys' journey was to the biggest stage of them all. Like, really, nowadays, unless you're like a power lifter or ex-football player and you get signed to NXT, that's the only way you can make it to the big time in a couple years. And if you're just a guy on the indies that gets trained, your journey is going to be way longer. But these guys, their dedication, their hunger, their passion, and their drive, everything, they had a truly amazing story. I'm going to tell you just some things I saw from my point of view, things that I've seen with my own eyes, and just how amazing I thought it was. So, I started training, and about a month later, Robbie McAllister came, and in my first match ever, he was the referee because he had just started then. And then another month after that, Rory McAllister came all the way from Scotland. Now, Robbie grew up in Ontario, and he's Scottish, but he grew up in Ontario, whereas Rory came right from Scotland. Now, right away, these guys clicked. They were like brothers. Their bond is I can't even explain it, how amazing of a bond they had. And they were so dedicated. Like, Robbie McAllister, he spoke Scottish, but not like straight out of the land like Rory did. And like, they would study, and he would teach them how to say certain words, and they would practice and practice and practice until they got it just perfectly. They spent all their money they could, especially like Rory. He gave up everything to move from Scotland to come to Canada. And so anyway, like, we were training together, and I remember like only a couple months later, these guys were booked in every show in the main events of Ontario. Now, see, nowadays there's like 25 promotions in Ontario, and the workers have it really good. But back then there was only like 3 or 4, and everyone was booking them. They were in the main events, and like, even though I had started a little bit before them, like a couple months later, they were training me, like, because they just picked up it so good, and they were so smart. They asked questions, they picked people's brains of people that they work with. They garnered everyone's respect, and like, especially not just dedicated with the wrestling, like, they were dedicated with the bodybuilding. I remember like Robbie and Rory, like, they would try and teach me how to work out, and I would just listen to everything they said because they had perfected their craft and they knew what to do. And like, I was just blown away. Like, the first show we ever did was in Woodstock, Ontario. I wrestled Rory, and Robbie McAllister wrestled Lars Phoenix. I know, surprising. The Highlanders' first match wasn't even a tag team match that I remember anyway. That's how I recall it. And like, so and then they were doing all these other shows. They started going to the States, and like, they would come back, and like, pretty soon they were training the class. Like, the trainers we had there were good at teaching us the basics of like the chain wrestling and stuff, but like, they would go and they would pick up knowledge about selling and psychology and timing and stuff like that. And they were always so generous and helpful of any of the other students that wanted to learn. And like, I was really young then. I was only like 18 or 19. And I had a big passion for the business. But I also was like, I didn't know the things that I know now. So I didn't like ask as many questions as I should have. But they were always so polite with it. So within a year, they were signed to developmental and for the WWE. And like, in a wrestling aspect, they were still like kind of green in that way. Like, they didn't wrestle like they were green. They wrestled like they've been wrestling for years. But when they got signed to developmental, like, they had never had the trainers that they had like down in developmental, and they picked up on it so fast. And I remember hearing stories, like Robbie would even tell me like Rory was the nicest guy. He would buy everyone dinner, and like, they would stay at the school for the long hours, and they just wanted to know every single thing they could learn about the business. Because I remember Robbie came home one time, like, they had a couple vacation, they came for a break and whatnot. And then, like, not even a year later, they were on the main roster. Like, this is like 2 or 3 years into the business, and they just they just kept getting better. They just kept taking it to another level, and they totally exceeded anyone's expectations except for their own, because they always expected the best of themselves. And you don't see a rise like that in wrestling nowadays. You don't see people come up that fast and make it to the big stage. Like, I remember I wrestled Rory McAllister in that first match, and we did another show in like Elmer or Elmira a couple days later, and I don't have that one on tape. I wish I did. I felt that match was better, but like 2 years later, they're in the WWE wrestling like Shawn Michaels and Triple H, and like having some great feuds with like Crime Time and the Spirit Squad, and I just feel like they don't get the respect they really truly deserve. Like, these guys should bring them back. They bring back Headbangers, they bring back Spirit Squad. The Highlanders would be so over if they gave them another shot. And like, it was just amazing. And like a couple years later, they got released from WWE, which the circumstances were unfortunate. TNA, like, I have nothing good to say about the people that did that to them, because that was just rude. You don't do that to the boys. Like, really, he's going there to support his friends, and they're going to put him on blast like that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm not going to get into great detail about it, but it was not a fair shake of things. Like, really. Anyway, so they came back and they started doing some shows like in 2005 in PWA. And I remember, like, they were so helpful. Like, anybody that would listen, they would share knowledge with them. Like, I remember one time I wrestled Jesse Jones in Cambridge, and Robbie McAllister, I didn't even ask him. He pulled me aside and he was like telling me what to do and my timing and like fight back more here and like my charisma, and like he was so generous with it. And Rory was always a class act. He always had kind words to say to people. He always like was positive and lifted people up, and like they were so generous with their knowledge. And like, these guys were main eventing, like when they went over, like maybe they weren't main event on a lot of the pay-per-views, but when they went overseas, like to Europe and stuff, they were the main events, like in so many of those cities. Like, they traveled the world, they made good money, and like, I seen Rory went to like some kind of like Comic-Con a couple weeks back. I wish these guys would do more of that. I wish people would have bigger demand for them, because they truly are, like, to me, especially in Ontario, like legends in Ontario wrestling. Like, it's just, they fast track their way, and like every couple of weeks they were like all so much better. Like, anybody that would listen to them or give them the time of day, and this is a great thing to see for young wrestlers, do it the way they did it. They just dedicated everything into traveling, getting as many shows as they can, learning as much knowledge. They worked out religiously. They spent money and invested in themselves. And I was just happy, like, I got to be around the early years of them. They were always so great to me and so kind to me. And I have nothing but wonderful stories. I have a couple matches on tape still too. Like, I think there's one with me under a mask on Rory McAllister on YouTube. And I just gotta say, I think that these guys should get a bigger shine. Like, really, they are the Highlanders. They were wrestling like 2 years, and they were in the WWE, and they were wrestling 2 years like in small shows. It wasn't like they had gone to Japan or like were wrestling like big independent shows. They were just like wrestling in Ontario, and they made it so fast with a great gimmick and great work ethic. And I have nothing but great things to say about them. If you ever have a chance, give them their props. They deserve it. And let's see a Highlanders comeback. I love the Highlanders. Anyway, that's just a small glimpse of some of the things I saw. I was around them a little bit, like I said, but when I was around them, it didn't take long, and they were out there doing their thing. Folks, this is episode 24 of The W.I.L.L.I.W Show, which stands for Wrestling is Life, Life is Wrestling. Remember, like, or you get a leg drop. Comment, or you get a clothesline. Subscribe, or you get a suplex. I'm Elian Habanero. I love wrestling. Cuba!